To ask you first about how has the environment changed for you since you did the 60 Minutes episode, and you kind of jumped into this. How has your environment around the college here changed?
I see. Well, actually, that occurred around the time I started as Vice Chancellor for Research 5 years ago here at the University of Missouri, and as a professor of physics. And naturally, I'd say there was the same surprise that I had personally. I had thought, just from the little I knew from 1989 and 1990, that cold fusion had been refuted. I thought it had been debunked. I thought that it was somewhere between foolishness and fraud. These words had been used in the past, and again, I hadn't in particular spent time to closely read into and try to understand. So as such, it came as a huge surprise to me that, as they say, there really was a there, that there was really something quite substantial that this community's pursuing. And so I found it a surprise, so that makes me very understanding of people who have the same surprise I had about 5 years ago. And so when people would tie into me about how dare you say cold fusion's real, I would keep saying science is not a belief system. Science is an objective way to determine the truth following the scientific method. And people would all get on the same page there. And then you go down the evidence in support of cold fusion, if you will. Now, cold fusion's a historical term. I think that as we start to elucidate and understand this in more detail, we see that this is a nuclear phenomena that's different in many ways from any nuclear phenomena we've considered in the past. But what it is, don't get caught up in your own taxonomy here. Don't get caught up in your own way of characterizing things. Rather, realize this for exactly what science is supposed to do. Discover new effects, elucidate them, understand them. People go, how far will this go? Well, I don't know, because I don't thoroughly understand the science yet. But I do know that empirically there's something fascinating here. And I do know that we would be irresponsible as physicists and other scientists not to pursue this to the peak of our capability. And when you start to discuss this with academic administrators, my superiors, I've found good support from them because they agree this is what a Jeffersonian university should do.
Fabulous. Do you feel that with all the scientific papers that have been published on cold fusion and the anomalous effects, do you feel that that constitutes enough to convince skeptics that it is real?
Well, I think in practice, many people remain I remain skeptical today. I mean, as a research scientist following the scientific method, I'm always trying to disprove what I think rather than try to prove what I think. And I think Dr. David Kidwell from the Naval Research Labs, one of our two keynote speakers, made that case exquisitely well during the start of the conference, and he kind of continued that theme throughout, which is wonderful. So being skeptical is a very, very good thing. Rejecting people on the basis of your brawn and refusing to follow an objective method of considering what they've done and then trying to intimidate them, that's bullying. That's not science. And so I think, in a sense, there have been a lot of bullying of this field because of, again, past miscommunication, misunderstanding, missteps that people in this field have made. But my message would be, get over it. There's something fascinating scientifically here. We have to elucidate it, we have to understand it, and we have to, on that basis, go wherever the data leads us. And I think from some of the empirical evidence that we've seen so far, there is a distinct possibility that as we understand this new aspect of nuclear science we haven't understood before, we may find solutions to world problems. But can I promise that? No, I can't promise that. But I can promise if you don't look, you'll never see.
Let me ask you, because you are associated with a research university and an educational institution, can you talk about the differences between the way science is done in academic environments and the way things evolve scientifically in the commercial aspect. What are the differences, and what is the gap between?
I'd be delighted to address that. I started my career as a physicist at Sandia National Laboratories. I have started a successful company in percutaneous cryosurgery and in intravascular cryosurgery, and again, that was about 11 years ago, and that's been acquired now by a very successful company on the West Coast. So I have great respect for the free enterprise and commercial process completely. I guess the way I would best characterize it is it's all research and development. And in academia, it's a huge early stage research, so it's a huge R and a little d right now. And in industry, it's a little r and a huge D. So if you will, the statistic I love is that 25 years ago, 70% of all the R&D 100 awards went to industry, went to Bell Labs, IBM, many other companies in the commercial space. Today, so that meant that 30 years ago, a lot of the early phase research was really going on in companies, okay? That's, if you will, been pretty much outsourced by companies to public institutions and universities, okay? Today, 70% of R&D 100 awards go to public entities. Okay, so that's a definite shift. So it's critically important to us in universities to be able to get the results of this early phase research translated out into industry, where the much more development intensive effort based upon the solid and well-established science can bring these things to fruition. And see, this is where I'm saying the R part of R&D in this community is not yet complete. There's still many fundamental questions about the research. What I'm concerned about is the people who have been out to get this field have been trying to nip it in the bud and prevent that healthy process of academic research from progressing. And here we're determined to get our junior colleagues involved. We're encouraged by the wonderful philanthropy and the wonderful insights of Sidney Kimmel to make it possible for people following strictly the scientific method to explore this new phenomenon and see where it leads. Where it leads, you don't know. But I do know that, in an R&D sense, very few companies are deeply enough funded to get very early into the research side of the R&D equation. They're much better suited to base upon well-established science to do the development. So that's why when I started the conference, I talked about 3 classes of devices. One class uses well-established understanding of nuclear and condensed matter science to develop new devices. The second class, which I would include this recent discovery of deep nuclear process and thunderstorms, a discovery made by NASA's Enrico Fermi satellite at the beginning of 2010. That's an example of where, well, the nuclear science was well established, but it was a surprising phenomenon in condensed matter physics in retrospect. And then the third class is areas where it's just a surprise across the board, both in nuclear and condensed matter physics. And in that case, I would consider the Fleischmann effect, this excess heat, this anomalous excess heat. Call it anomalous because it's an anomaly because we don't understand where it fits in physics today. But here's the key thing. To say that we are so positive that everything that can be known is known in physics, that if something doesn't agree with our knowledge, it's to be rejected, is a huge violation of the scientific method. It's very contradictory to the advancement of science. And I would say also, it makes another big fundamental mistake. People throughout the ages have been saying, everything there is to know, we know now. And it's all a matter of applications. Every time they've said that for the last many centuries, they've been wrong. And people who are saying that today are wrong. There's a lot yet fundamentally to be discovered in physics, I assure you.
Can you talk about the development of this science and technology and the issue with for private industry getting patents, as well as what academics can develop, and how there's a lot of secrecy within this community?
Yeah.
How do they relate, and what are some of the issues there?
Yeah, that's a great question. David French, who attended, he's a patent attorney from Canada, led one of kind of an impromptu session that was very valuable about intellectual property aspects in this field. In the past, people that have been determined that this is foolish have managed to convince, I guess, I don't know the dynamics of this, but someone apparently convinced the United States Patent and Trademark Office, USPTO, that anything in the area of what's been historically called cold fusion, I like to call it condensed matter nuclear science, is in a sense a perpetual motion machine or something that should be rejected without review. Well, that was really a profound disservice, because a patent is a publication. So the purpose of patents is to kind of foster a very positive innovation environment by allowing people to invest private money. I mean, if you're investing my retirement money or your retirement money or anybody else, you want to be sure that that company keeps the equity of that investment. So the point is, patents give you the opportunity to share openly your inventions without fear that you're going to lose the economic exclusiveness based upon your upfront investment in that invention. So that's what patents provide. Now, one thing that I would say over the last 25 years, it's been a real concern, is when patents were not awarded, companies in the space didn't have that venue to share with the world what they're doing with the understanding of assured market exclusion for some limited time, which is what a patent provides you. Instead, they had to resort to extreme trade secrecy. They couldn't share what they were thinking, they couldn't share what they were doing, because if they did, they would disrespect the financial interest of their investors. I am delighted to say, because I had worked with Dave French some, about a year and a half ago, and we wrote a letter, Dave wrote a letter. Dave French is the patent guy, I'm a physicist, but he wrote a letter to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office expressing these concerns, and quite responsibly, the Patent and Trademark Office came back and said, yes, we see your point, be assured, any patent application meeting the general requirements for a patent will be awarded a patent. And I was just delighted to hear last night from from Pam, who won the award, the medal, and from others that have collaborated with her through Navy SPAY-WAR, that in fact they have received, and I've heard this from other people, they are receiving patents now on what used to be called cold fusion devices. I use the term cold fusion again for historic purposes, but the point though is that now the process is running correctly, and that will allow companies to fully publish, because a patent is a full publication of what they do, and no longer will companies have to go back and rely on trade secrecy to protect the position of their investors.
One more question.
Sure.
How do you feel about the program that you've instituted here on the university that involves young students in the Skinner program? Do you feel like that's maybe the first official program investigating this new science?
I think in a university, in a major research university, I believe we've established the first formal program to involve people of all ages, but students and people throughout the process at a university in this effort to really elucidate and understand, again, what has been called historically cold fusion, and which now that we're doing that and applying the full resource base of we have the largest nuclear reactor in academia, we have a cyclotron, we have some of the best material scientists and nanoscientists in the country. By combining that combined expertise, and by the way, 7 professors here have just been overjoyed and excited intellectually to engage in this process as well. And again, because of Sidney Kimmel's philanthropy and vision, this has become a reality here on a major research campus in the United States. And so in the United States, yes, I think it's the first thing on a major research campus, and I can't stress enough how important that is, because it gets back to the infrastructure and the support you need for the scientific method. And I must publicly thank Brian Foster, our provost, for again understanding this, falling back, and the Chancellor, the Provost, and our Chancellor Grady Deaton, for falling back on what it really means to be a Jeffersonian university. Because again, there it's not a matter of whether it's popular, whether it's not popular, etc. It matters whether it has an objective basis, and if it does, then there's a responsibility for any major research university to push all objective information to see where that may lead. Again, I think it would be irresponsible for us not to do what we're doing today.
Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Hey, I'll tell you what, use that. I don't know where you plan to get the circulation.